Forgiveness isn't something we naturally talk about in grief. Because when your world has been shattered, forgiveness can feel like an insult. How do you forgive someone when their actions are reckless, selfish, or just careless that led to the unthinkable? Or maybe the person you can't forgive is yourself. Welcome to the Grief Mentor podcast, and this is your host, Teresa Davis. Friends, you might feel like forgiveness is impossible, and honestly, I get it. This isn't about pat answers or pretending it doesn't still hurt. In today's episode, we're going to talk honestly about what forgiveness really looks like after child loss. How to begin to forgive yourself when guilt won't let go. And how to forgive others, especially when they've never asked for it. Not because it's easy, friend, but because you're worth it. If you're grieving the death of your child and you want the steps that lead to believing with confidence that life is still worth living, then you're in the right place. Hello, I'm Teresa, a grief mentor. That's been where you are, and I teach grieving moms like you how to navigate life after child loss. If you're ready to take a step of courage and build a solid foundation to live with hope and purpose, then I'm here to teach you how. Are you ready for what God has for you? Then I'm ready to teach you. Before we get into today's content, I want to make sure you know about the Grief Mentor Memorial Day sale. I do not have sales often. In fact, they only happen about once a year. So if you're tired of pretending that you're okay, because no one really gets you, if you're ready to take that next step, but you don't know where to start, this is for you. Now through May 31st, you can save on a one-to-one grief mentor session. All you have to do is go to the show notes and follow that link. If you don't want to do that, you can reach out to me per email and I will send you the link so that you can schedule your time with me where we can sit down one-to-one and work on what you need most. Teaching forgiveness after child loss is twofold, and that's why this episode is going to be broken up into two parts. The first part is going to be how to forgive yourself. The second part is how to forgive others. And friend, I have not worked with a grieving mom yet, including myself, that has not struggled with unforgiveness. And I'm going to explain to you why that is. And then I want to help you overcome it. Point number 1, recognize the voice of shame versus the voice of the shepherd. After the death of your child, shame can become a constant companion. It makes you question every decision that you made throughout the life of your child. It makes you question every moment you didn't know what you didn't know. It accuses you of missing something that you should have caught. It tells you that their death certainly must be your fault because it's somebody's fault, right? But that's not the voice of God. The voice of the shepherd doesn't condemn. He speaks in truth and love, never shame. Jesus isn't asking for perfection. He's asking to walk with you in the pain. Would you speak to another grieving mom the way that you speak to yourself? Yeah, I don't think Jesus would either. He never shames the brokenhearted. Point number 2, grief distorts memory. Listen closely. Grief has a way of rewriting the past through the lens of pain. Let that soak in a minute. What was once seen as a normal day is now seen as a missed sign. What was once a boundary, a choice, now feels like a fatal mistake. But memory in grief, friend, is not always trustworthy. Pain magnifies what you didn't know. It makes you responsible for what was never in your control. You see, God knows the intentions of your heart. I've yet to work with a grieving mom who set out to cause harm to her child. But yet, hearing those thoughts unfold, that's exactly what you begin to believe about yourself. But here's a fact. He remembers your humanity. God knows your limits, and He never expected you to be more than you are. And that is a loving mom doing her best. God saw your love, not just your actions. Even in the moments you now question, He saw a mother who deeply cared for her child, and that matters. Number 3, surrender the outcome you couldn't change. Sounds so easy, does it, when you say it like that? It's far from easy, friend, and I'm not suggesting that it is. But forgiving yourself doesn't mean you stop grieving, but it does mean that you release the responsibility that you were never meant to carry. Surrender says, God, I don't understand any of this, but I trust you to carry the weight of this pain. And this is not a one and done decision. No, friend, it's a daily laying down of the guilt, the questions, the what ifs. But the biggest piece about this right here is that you have to understand and be able to see that that's actually what you're doing. You may never feel forgiven, but forgiveness is not about a feeling. It's an agreement with heaven that you were never meant to be your child's personal savior. You can't fill those shoes, friend. The shoes that you can fill is the love of a mother. Forgiveness says, God, I trust you with what I will probably never understand. And I release myself from a punishment that you never intended for me to carry. Now let's move into part 2 of our teaching section today. Let's talk about forgiving the people whose actions changed everything. If you're walking a road of child loss, or someone else was responsible for your child's death, or someone's actions inadvertently led to your child's death, then friend, this part is for you. How to forgive others. Point number 1, forgiveness is not approval or excusing harm. It's releasing the grip it has on your soul. Forgiveness doesn't mean what happened is okay, but it does mean what happened no longer has authority over your future. This is especially hard when someone's actions directly led to your child's death. A drunk driver, a negligent doctor, an accidental overdose. Someone made a wrong choice. Someone was careless. Someone covered up facts that could have prevented your child's death. I'm pausing here, friend, because that's such a trigger for me. Because the people responsible for Andrew's death called it a mishap. That's minimizing the damage. Maybe you're experiencing that as well. Or worse, maybe they scoff at your grief. Friend, you may never ever hear them say, I'm sorry. You may never see justice carried out the way your heart longs for. And that makes the act of forgiveness feel like betrayal, like letting them off the hook. I'm reminiscing right here, and I just have to talk about this because many of you will remember the case of Natalie Holloway. It happened many years ago, long before I experienced personal loss of child loss. However, that story gripped the nation. She was a young woman who went away on a senior trip, who never came back home. Her mom got that call that you and I have received. And what strikes me about her story in the arena of forgiveness that we're talking about today, I watched that woman strive and long for the truth. I watched her dig and hunt for the facts. And my heart bled for her then, and it bleeds for her now. I prayed for her. I prayed for their family. Watching the updates, just constantly keeping abreast of that story. I'll never forget Greta Van Susteren. She took hold of that story and she never let it down, even to this day. But this is how her story relates to what we're talking about here today. Once they discovered who was responsible for Natalie's death, and I'm not going to say his name because I don't want to give him credit, because that's what he likes. He likes credit. He's twisted in that way. That's the voice of the enemy, a world of evil that you and I don't understand and don't want to understand, okay? But whenever she confronted him, she actually confronted him in prison. just almost begging him to tell her what he did and what happened that night. And he refused to do it, friend. It was a hold that he had on her that he would not let go of. That is pure evil. But this is what I want to say to you today, right here. Here's the truth. We cannot control another person's life or another person's decision. The decisions of the people that contributed to your child's death is not something that you will ever have control over. Therefore, you will never have control of whether or not they admit it, whether or not they will ever say, I'm sorry, whether or not they will even show mercy toward you and the people that your child loved. But here is truth. Forgiveness isn't releasing them for what they've done, but it is saying that they no longer hold the keys to your peace. What you are forgiving is not an act, okay? You're not forgiving what they did or what their actions led to. Hear me now. But what you are doing when you release that hold that they have over you is that you are releasing the soul tie of hatred and bitterness and powerlessness that wants to keep you bound. You don't forgive because they're sorry. You forgive because God is just. You forgive because God says, I will take revenge. I will make this right. That doesn't always mean it's going to happen this side of heaven, friend. So you may see a court case go awry. You may not get the revenge that you want here on earth, but please don't get lost in knowing that God has the final word, because he sees what no court can. And your soul deserves to feel the peace that comes from being in his presence and letting go of it, because it is not your problem to solve. Point number 2, forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. If you know this person, or if you have contact with them in social settings or random encounters, you don't have to speak to them, friend. You may need to create a boundary for your safety and your sanity and your soul. And boundaries is something I love to talk about. If you've been through the grief roadmap, you know that's the first place we start. Because if you don't have the tools to be able to create a healthy boundary around yourself in your grief journey, friend, you will not have the ability to create that safety and sanity for your soul. Forgiveness is simply surrendering control. Forgiveness says, I trust God with the justice. I release this person from the weight that they hold over my heart. I choose peace over punishment. Point number 3, Jesus understands unjust pain. There is no pain more unjust than death on a cross by crucifixion. Friend, you're not Jesus, and neither am I. But here's a fact. He told us, you will have trouble, but take heart, because I have overcome the world. Right now, your peace comes in his presence. If you're a child of God, his presence lives inside you. Yield to it. That's not a one and done. It's a daily surrender. Forgiveness will never feel easy, and it will never feel fair. But it is the soil where freedom begins to grow. Start with this prayer today. Lord, I surrender. I release what I cannot fix. Help me, Jesus, surrender forgiveness. Because I choose mercy. Because I choose you. Because I want to live in your presence. Friend, the scripture tells us that we can do nothing apart from him. Forgiveness is not an easy topic, and I believe that's why you don't hear much about it, honestly. I believe that's why forgiveness is not talked about as much as it should be, because it's really not black and white in the scriptures. And that's what we want, right? We want to live in a world full of black and white. And we may live in that world, But when your child dies, there's no such thing as black and white. There's this huge gray area that becomes really wide. It's reminiscent to me when you see those pictures of a person standing on one side of a mountain and they're looking at the other side of the mountain and the gap is so wide, there's no way to cross it. Yeah, that's what forgiveness felt like to me in my story. But friend, that's why it's supernatural. And until we find a place where we can surrender that and lay that down, it doesn't mean that you take it up every now and again, because it sure happens to me. But then I have to remind myself. The people that have done things that created harm to our children, they have to live inside of that choice every day. And whether or not they ever come to a place where they can admit they're wrong, it doesn't matter. It really does not matter. What matters to you is truth. And this is the truth. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. I will take revenge. I will hold them responsible. You see, one thing we need to learn about boundaries is learning to be able to control what we can control and letting go of what we cannot. That's a huge boundary lesson. Creating a safe place for you to be able to grieve is the first step. Learning how to create a boundary that allows you to let go of things that you cannot change is the next step. And friend, it may be the hardest step, but you're not alone. When we invite Jesus into this pain, something really supernatural happens. And that's all I have for you today. So until next time, take care.